An obvious major fear that I hear from buyers when they're purchasing a home is that they're going to incur some giant expense that they didn't know about right after they buy the home. And I totally get that. And fortunately for you, I've been through thousands of homes and I know what to look for, or at least alert you to, in the home buying process. Hi, I'm Carolyn Bauerschlag, a local realtor right here in West Houston, helping people just like you relocate from all over the country right to our great city. I like to joke with people that I'm like your dad when we go and look at homes. It's your job to make sure if you like it, and it's my job to go kick the tires and make sure that everything looks like it's probably going to be in good shape. Now, of course, we're going to have the home inspected, but we do a lot of education before you ever write a contract. Once you go under contract on a home, you are going to pay for an inspection and an HVAC inspection. You're going to pay an option fee. Maybe you need to call out a plumber, an electrician, and very quickly this exercise can get costly. So I like to help educate you to make sure that we know as much as we do before you have to start laying out money. Now, I think about ongoing major expenses related to home ownership to kind of fall into 4 major buckets. That's going to be your foundation, your roof, your air conditioning, and any kind of water intrusion. So let me walk you through some of this. Now, if you're moving to Houston and you don't know much about our soil composition, and why would you, it's important for you to know that Houston is more or less kind of swampy, right? Like we have clay foundations in our soil. It's not necessarily like bedrock that these foundations are laid upon. So what we see is foundation movement over time. Now, not all homes are going to have foundation movement, but there's 2 different types of foundations that we see on most homes, and those are going to fall into the pier and beam category or slab. So I would say if the house is built 1940 or before, it's probably pier and beam. And I would say anytime 1950s, 60s forward, it's going to be slab. Now, pier and beam homes are kind of neat because they're up on, literal piers. They're elevated from the street, and you're going to get your beautiful craftsman or bungalow homes that have that historic charm. But you're also going to get maybe not as a sophisticated literal foundation for your home, right? So when you own a pier and beam home, I would expect that maybe annually, maybe every 18 months, you're going to have to have a foundation person potentially shore up or shim your piers because they just kind of sink into the ground over time. Now, those piers also support beams or like struts that go front door to back door on your home. In best case scenario, those beams are metal, and potentially not as great scenarios that those beams are wood. So Houston is a humid place. When you have a pier and beam foundation, air is going to flow underneath that house, but it's also very humid here. Water can accumulate under the home. You have to have some really good drainage going to make sure that it's not stagnating water. But if those beams potentially get rotten, those do have to be replaced. So you might sink a little more money over time into the maintenance of your foundation when you own a pier and beam structure. Kind of an oddity that we've discovered over the years is that when you're looking to get an opinion on the state of a pier and beam home, engineers oftentimes won't touch them, right? So you may think, oh, well, I'm going to get an authoritative source to come and declare how this foundation is. And we called several professional engineering companies over time, and they were kind of like, yeah, we don't really opine or give you an opinion on the state of this pier and beam home or make recommendations for what would make it best. And what I think is that it's because it's kind of a fluid situation where it always kind of changes. If you are purchasing a pier and beam home, something that I do want you to know is that it'll never be 100% level front door to back door. So what they test for is what we call deflection in the foundation, or like how much elevation difference there is as that foundation bumps along. So if you're seeing about a 1/2 inch of movement over like a 20-foot run, that's perfectly normal. If you see something drop off like an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches in one particular place, that would be kind of an indication that we probably need to shore it up. So on the flip side of that, I mentioned to you slab. Now, slab foundations are kind of what they sound like. It's just a big old hunk of concrete that's like several feet deep. And slabs come in varying degrees of health. So if a slab is built, or a home was built in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, I'm going to be personally stunned if that slab has not been remediated somehow with like foundation repair. So if you think about a slab as being like a big old cookie, over time when that ground moves underneath the slab, the cookie can break. And fortunately, there are methods to repair it. And when we repair a slab foundation, they drive cement or concrete pillars into the ground until they hit a point of resistance. So it might be 10, 15, 20 feet underground. They're putting cement piers underneath your home. Unfortunately, the ground continues to move. And so once you have movement, it's very likely that you will continue to have to shore up a foundation. So when we have people that are shopping in gorgeous neighborhoods that were built in the 60s that are in very popular areas of Houston, my baseline assumption is that it will have had foundation repair. This is not a reason to not buy a home, but it is a reason to make sure that you call out a professional engineer and make sure that things are in the condition that you would hope that they would be for stability long term. If they are not, then this is something that we typically negotiate during the inspection period, and it's just kind of par for the course. We know it's going to happen. Now, something that is beneficial to us in later years construction, so I would say maybe 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, current, present day, is that builders started to put into slabs what we call a post-tension cable system, which is where they said, hey, maybe these foundations would be in a little bit better shape if what we did is made cables run through the slab instead of it just being like rebar, right? So if you think about a cookie breaking, because it's got rebar, it's got like these hard break lines. And if you think about post-tension cable slabs, I think the idea is that they're perhaps more like a tortilla. Like maybe it'll just flow just a little bit better with kind of the movement underneath the ground. Now, we're kind of still proving out that theory, right? Like these post-tension cable systems really started to show up, I would say, in the 90s. And I don't know if they're old enough yet to really say, oh yeah, they're great, or oh, maybe they're not as good as we thought they were. But I would say like 30-year-old homes, if it's had some sort of like shoring up or foundation repair, that's not crazy. But what I would say is in the realm of poor construction is if a home is only 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and we're already having foundation repair, that's something as a buyer's agent that would give me pause. So a classic money pit sort of foundation situation that I would characterize would be like if we use that cookie example, it's not so much the cookie was broken in half. That can be kind of fixed somewhat easily. It might be something where the cookie, like you set it on the floor and you stomped on it and it just like shattered into like 50 pieces, right? And we do see that from time to time, right? Where it's not that there's a clear break, it's just that the foundation is literally crumbling. That might be a money pit where there's not really an advisable fix. And what we probably need to do is raise the house and have it rebuilt. So at that point, the house might be lot value. And we see this a lot in neighborhoods that literally are 60 and 70 years old. It's very common to see these homes purchased at lot value by a builder and then made into something new. I always like to kind of tag this back to, if you think about commercial real estate, those buildings really don't last longer than about 40 years. You'll see in big cities, they just blow them up and they just start over. So if a home is 60 or 70 years and it's not looking like things are in good shape, I would say perhaps it's best for you to move on so that you do avoid that money pit. The next major area of financial investment that we see buyers make is into their roof. Now this kind of irritates me a little bit, and by a little bit I mean a lot. Pre-COVID, a roof was pretty affordable. I don't mean to say it wasn't a lot of money, but it was perhaps a 4 digits figure instead of a 5-digit figure. And now when I go and I talk to people, they'll say, gosh, yeah, I got quoted $25,000 to replace my roof. I got quoted $32,000 to replace my roof. I'm like, cool. We're going to pay the essential equivalent of a car to just cover your home to make sure that it's like solid. Previously, I would say it was very common for us to hear, hey, that roof is going to cost you $6,500, or maybe on the high end, $10,000, $11,000, $12,000. So now when I hear $32,000, it really kind of hurts my heart for people. So what we encourage people to do in the home buying process to avoid these big issues is to, first of all, determine the age of the roof. Roofs here, best case scenario in Texas, I would say like a midpoint to really hang your hat on is about 15 years. If a roof goes to 16, 17, 18, it's like, we're hanging on, like you're doing the thing, but it might not last. And it also might not be all that insurable. So think of like a midpoint as 15 years. So if a roof is 10 years old, we want to make sure that the buyer is aware that, hey, like, let's go get this roof inspected. We might pay another $100 to have a roofer actually walk it, and make sure that there's not, substantial damage. But if a roof is 10 years old, I'm telling a buyer, make sure that you basically establish yourself a sinking fund where you're going to put a little bit of money away every single year for the next 5 years to pay for a roof in cash. Now, Carolyn, why are you paying for a roof in cash? Well, because here in Houston, Texas, the insurers are essentially trying to make themselves not responsible for paying for roof replacement. Now, this may be foreign to your ear if you're coming here from another part of the country, but very frequently we are seeing insurance policies being written at 2% or 3% wind and hail deductibles for homes. And what they're essentially saying is we, the insurer, don't want to be responsible for paying for a new roof. So a major cost that you can incur is roof replacement if you're not aware of it. So that's something that we're always looking at. Now, another kind of way that you can get tied up is if you are not aware of the type of shingle that is installed on your roof. So I've chatted about this before, but I just want to hit it again. There's two major types of roofing materials here in Houston, and one of them is going to be called a 3-tab shingle. So if you imagine a 3-tab shingle, it's like laying sheets of paper end to end and calling it a roof. So there's really just one layer of thin asphalt between you and all of the elements, which is really not ideal, right? And the other type of shingle that we have is called an architectural shingle. And this is what most people think of when they think of a quality roof. It's where you're going to take all of these sheets of paper and just lay them on top of each other so that you have a very dense or thick layer of asphalt between you and all of the elements for a roof, right? So obviously that's what we're looking for. If you get a 3-tab shingle and you're not aware that that's something that you're supposed to be looking at, you're really only going to get maybe 5, 6, 7 years out of that roof instead of 15. So I mentioned to you before that I'm basically your dad on a home inspection. So one of the major ways that we're helping you avoid major pitfalls is interrogating all of this before you ever write a contract. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, we've gotten really good at negotiating roofs. I can basically quote you the cost of a roof by looking at it. It's a special skill set that I've developed over the last couple of years. But in any case, this is an area that we're going to be looking at closely before you ever write that contract. The next big thing that can cost you money in your home is going to be your air conditioning system. Now, here in Houston, I would kind of expect that similar to a roof, it should last you about 15 years. And of course, just like anything, there are asterisks all over this, right? So a couple of things to consider here. I'll teach you whenever you're my buyer how to look at the data plates that are on these HVAC systems so that you can kind of determine how old these are. So besides just like sticking your head out the door and seeing, is that thing really rusted or does it look kind of shiny and new, we can really kind of determine what the age is again before you ever write that contract. But there's a couple of other like finer points that we really need to be careful of. And one of those is that the type of refrigerant that's running through that system needs to kind of be still available. So we're not really seeing this so much anymore, but they still are out there. And these are going to be systems that are running a type of refrigerant called R22. So the system might only be like 12 or 13 years old running this older refrigerant. But if like the condenser goes out or if the coil springs a leak, you can't just replace one component or the other because that R22 refrigerant is no longer available. So when we're doing an inspection on a home, we want to know what type of refrigerant is in there. And we want to really look at that coil too, to make sure that the coil in the attic is not rusted and leaking freon out that you can't replace, because it goes from being a very simple fix of maybe adding freon to the system if it's just leaking outside of like a couple $100 to really being like basically a full system replacement of several $1,000s. Now, another thing that we're really going to interrogate is what brand of system is on that house. Very popular amongst builders is a system called a Lennox. I feel like every builder must have some sort of contract with this AC company because we see them all over. But unfortunately, if you just Google Lennox air conditioning, you'll see very quickly that they are caught up in all kinds of lawsuits for basically putting together very shoddy material. And my first home actually did have a Lennox, and we couldn't figure out why it had so many problems. We were dumping a couple $100s into this machine like literally every year, and this thing died finally at like 11 years old. We got home from a weekend trip, and we walked outside and we're like, why does it sound like someone's weed whacking right outside our bedroom window? And it was like the fan had come loose and it just like scraped up the entire inside of the system. But what Lennox systems are really doing is installing very faulty coils. So I mentioned to you that those should last, 15 years, and these coils were rusting out in only 5. So again, as part of your inspection, we're going to make sure that you hire an HVAC tech to go through and really interrogate all these components, but there's a lot that we can do before you ever write an offer to see what type of components we're dealing with. The last major thing that we're really looking at to make sure you avoid a money pit right after you move in are areas for potential water intrusion. And if I were a first-time homebuyer, when I was a first-time homebuyer, I wasn't really aware that I had to be worried about water. I would say as a full-grown adult who's owned homes now for 13 years, I'm very afraid of water. It seems to be kind of like the hidden jump scare of home ownership. So what we're looking for is not necessarily like one big thing that's going to cause a problem, but lots of little areas to make sure that your home is watertight. So as part of a roof inspection, like you want to make sure that all of those little roof jacks or like ventilation points to the roof are watertight. You want to make sure for your water heater that the couplings that attach to the water heater aren't fully corroded or rusted out. And you want to look at the bottom of that water heater too to make sure that that 40-gallon tank of water that might very well be sitting in your attic doesn't have a bottom that's about to just rust out and dump all that water over your home. Other things that we do where I kind of joke that I'm your dad at an inspection is I'm going around to all of the toilets and checking behind them to make sure that we don't see water coming out of those. We look under the sinks to make sure that there hasn't been slow leaks into the cabinets. And then you'll kind of see me like run my hand along the drywall next to a bathtub. And I'm looking for moisture or all of the points where I know that these systems can fail, right? So water intrusion isn't necessarily obvious, but it is something that you have to kind of watch out for long term. I would say in homes that were built like in the 90s, early aughts, 2010s and current, we're seeing a lot of PVC pipes, copper pipes, or what we call PEX, which is that flexible plumbing material. So there's not really a lot of plumbing failure that happens there. But we're very acutely aware of the type of plumbing that's in a home as if it's going to be galvanized, which is a composite, right? Like you've got some steel, but also some alloys in there that may rust out fairly easily. Or you might have something like cast iron. So cast iron would be like a DOA, major situation, definite money pit that we need to really negotiate money for up front. Galvanized pipes are kind of mixed bag. We see galvanized pipes that are 70 years old that are in excellent shape, or not 70, maybe 60 years old that are in excellent shape. But we also see galvanized pipes that are 40 years old, 45 years old that are rusted out, right? So this is something that I'm always looking for on your behalf that you might not be aware of. So if you see me doing weird things at your inspection, like sticking my head all the way under the sink or like trying to look underneath like a dishwasher disposal, I'm trying to determine what's actually behind your walls. In the realm of water intrusion, that's not necessarily intruding into your home, but still potentially an issue for you, we'll also walk the exterior of the home to make sure that when we're walking, we don't step into something that's like a muddy pit. This is kind of a sneaky thing. You might think to yourself, oh, it just probably rained a little bit and this is a low spot in the yard that doesn't get a lot of sunlight. But it could also be something a little bit more serious. On the low side of serious, you might have like a fractured water line that's supporting your sprinkler. That's a fairly straightforward fix. They kind of dig it up. They have to go find it. It's a few $100s. It's kind of irritating, but that might be something that is a very explainable, easy reason to see soggy spots in your yard. But another more serious one, which is why we need to know what type of plumbing it is that main sewer line cracked or is it in good shape, right? So if you have cast iron pipes in your ground, so these are going to be homes that were built probably in the 60s and before, those basically disintegrate quickly. And it's like confetti paper thin by the time that you need to get to repair it. And it's just kind of these slow seepage leaks, right? So it may not be something like gushing out of your yard, but it may be that you're walking the perimeter of the house and it's just ooey gooey guck of long-term water seepage underneath your house. Another less serious reason that you might see that is that it's like the PVC has cracked, and that's usually a very straightforward fix. So when you hear people say, oh my gosh, I had to replace all of the plumbing underneath my home, typically that's like $25,000, $30,000, definite money pit if it's cast iron. If it's PVC, it tends to be a more straightforward fix. Ask me how I know. Several $1,000s into repairing a main drain line underneath one of our homes that we own. So again, experience is the best teacher. I've seen a lot, and I want to help you make sure that you don't inherit one of these major expenses. So long story short, yes, there are common pitfalls that are part of the buying process, but yours truly is here to help make sure that you avoid the big ones. We take a lot of time with education with our clients and at every showing to make sure that whatever you choose to purchase is going to be in excellent condition. If you found value in this video today, I would love for you to click the link below and subscribe. We put content like this out every single week. And if you found value in what we said, call your friendly neighborhood realtor. I'm a real person and I would love to help you find your next home here in West Houston. See you soon.